I think we'll start. We are having difficulty with the live streaming, so we'll be doing audio recording but not live streaming at this stage. Okay. Mr. Marshall, can I have your attention, please? We shall start. Yes, thank you. I enjoy telling you off. Yes. We are having some difficulty with the live streaming. We'll keep trying to do that, but the worst case scenario is that the audio recording is working, but it's not streaming live at the moment. So the best case or the worst case scenario is that we will we'll lodge the upload the audio as soon as we can after the meeting. Welcome to the Ordinary Council meeting at the Donnybrook Council Chambers, Wednesday the 24th of May, and we're opening the meeting at 5:06. Could I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land, the Wadandi people of the Noongar Nation, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Also, just will note that it's Reconciliation Week from the 27th of May to the 3rd of June, so just acknowledge that as a significant week. If I could now declare the meeting open and welcome the public gallery. Just remind people, I actually suggested to Lauren that we only print off half a dozen copies of the main sort of agenda items today because we end up with an awful lot of wastage. So if you're needing to do some sharing, please share nicely if you could, if you need copies of things. I would like to state that the meeting is being live streamed and recorded in accordance with council policy, and that it's being digitally recorded, and that members of the public are reminded that no other visual or audio recording of this meeting by any other means is allowed without the permission of the chairperson. And whilst every endeavour has been made to only record those who are actively participating in the meeting, loud comments or noises from the gallery may be picked up on the recording. Now, as I say, I would like to state that, but at the moment we have no live streaming or live audio, we just have an audio recording. So we'll just note that and apologise to anyone that may be impacted by that. We'll continue to work, if we can, to rectify it during the meeting. In terms of who is present tonight, I'm Gail McGowan, I'm the Commissioner. Ben Rose is an apology tonight. Ben has been called away because he has ill family members, so we hope they all get better soon. I think everyone's coming down with post-COVID lurgies of some description. We have Kim Dolzadelli, the Director of Corporate and Community, Kira Strange, the Acting Director of Operations, and Lauren Clifford, the Acting Manager of Executive Services, who's also doubling as Chief Panic Merchant, trying to get the technology working and take minutes at the same time, so be kind to her, please. So apart from Ben, we have no apologies. I'll just note also Ross Marshall in the gallery as well. No approved leave of absence and no applications for leave of absence. Announcements from the presiding member, and you will have to bear with me because I've got a fairly lengthy little thing this evening, simply because there's been quite a lot happening and there's quite a substantial agenda. So as I say, as there is quite a substantial agenda, I'll take the opportunity to provide preliminary comments as well as flag several items of public interest. Firstly, I'm now midway through my term as Commissioner, so my thoughts are turning to the October 21st council elections. This is in both a process sense and also in terms of encouraging a strong field of candidates who will be responsible for guiding the Shire through a period of change and reform. Along with Ben Rose, the CEO, and Lauren Clifford, the Governance Officer, or Manager Executive Services, I think is the proper title, I participated in a briefing session with the Office of the WA Electoral Commissioner a week or so ago. And the soon-to-be proclaimed reforms to the Local Government Act will see some changes, the most significant of which is possibly the introduction of optional preferential voting. The optional aspect means it is optional for the person voting as to whether they want to nominate preferred candidates in order rather than just mark boxes. So it's not a matter of the local government choosing whether we want to offer preferential voting. It's actually a requirement, or will be a requirement under the Act. and that preferential system will come into place for the 21st of October elections. So with any change, as with any change, it might make the actual election night count a little bit trickier as people come to terms with what that means. But the WA Electoral Commission will be factoring this into the support they provide, and they're also providing a couple of training sessions for the staff that will be involved as well. Probably the second key change will be the standardisation of the caretaker period across the state. The caretaker period will be at the close of, begin at the close of nominations, which will be 37 days before the election, until 6 p.m. on the election day. Now, I haven't actually done my count over today, but counting back then, we'll get those dates up. But by tradition, this means avoiding the making of any significant decisions that would bind an incoming council. In practical terms, I'm told it's something we've had in place for a number of years, so there won't be any noticeable change. And there's an agenda item at agenda item 9.3 of tonight's agenda that goes through all of the changes being proposed. I've also had a discussion with the Executive Director for Local Government at the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries to talk through some of the transitional arrangements from Commissioner to an elected council, and we'll progress that over the next couple of months. The question of candidates is broadly one for individuals in the community, and I've been really encouraged by discussions with a range of people who are thinking not only about the sort of representation they want, but also, I think really importantly, how as a community those people elected to provide the leadership and guidance required can be supported. And I think there are plans afoot to have one or more information sessions for prospective councillors in late June or July. And I think there's some good online resources available about the role of what a councillor involves, and obviously also a lot of previous elected members who can give some personal experience there. This evening's agenda, and Kim will talk about these couple of things in a significant amount of detail or more detail later, but it does include some comprehensive information on the five-yearly asset revaluations that have been undertaken. So that'll, I'll ask him to give what I call the layperson's interpretation of what that all means, because when I first saw it, I think I was somewhat alarmed, but I think it's worth talking that through. But to my mind, it does emphasise some of the challenges facing this community and many communities in terms of dealing with a broad and ageing asset base. So that's led me to have some discussions with the senior leadership team and state government agency representatives, including Lotterywest, about how the challenge might be tackled. Another important paper deals with the budget assumptions and in effect sets the markers for framing the annual budget. One of the significant considerations will be the impact of increases in waste management costs, and the special council meeting that was held earlier this month considered the new regional waste management contract. So I think for people that remember from the past, we've had a 10-year regional contract in place that's now just expired or on the point of expiry. So that's being redone, has been retendered. We've agreed to go with the regional model that has been coordinated by the City of Bunbury, and that was signed off earlier this month. We can't give the details yet because you have to wait for each of the councils. I think there's 7 councils from memory involved for their councils to sign off. So while there will be some benefits in signing up to the regional model, I just don't think we can get away from the fact that waste management costs and the complexity of dealing with waste, is just always increasing. And so I think there's both an educative sort of element and a reality that coming to grips with how we reduce the amount of waste as a society is something we will need to grapple with. That'll impact. But I will ask Kim to provide more detail when we get to that particular item as well. I do want to mention in terms of tonight's agenda, I'm also being requested, and I intend to agree to 2 late items being considered. The first relates to the proposed filling of the vacant role of Director Operations, which has been substantively vacant since the resignation of Steve Potter earlier in the year, but Kira has been doing a great job as Acting Director of Operations there. A suitable candidate has now been identified, so I'll be asked to approve that appointment. The second item relates to dealing with the creation and administration of a trust fund for the estate of the late Mr H.J. or Jack Denning and the late Frank Crowley for the benefit of residents of Tuia Lodge. And I thank the executors of the estate, and I think that's Neil Fole and I've now momentarily forgotten, John Ringe, I think, and also Louis Tuia for their assistance on the resolution of that matter. So effectively, the funds that have been held in trust by the council for both the Denning Trust Fund and the Frank Crowley Trust Fund will be transferred into a new vehicle, a new trust fund. And vehicle was a bit of a Freudian slip because I think the intention is hopefully to purchase a bus for the benefit of the residents of Tuia Lodge from that. I'd also note that I've received a request to not consider the items relating to the CEO performance appraisal, which are on the agenda tonight. But there is a requirement under the Local Government Act, I think it's section 5.38 from memory, that the annual CEO performance appraisal is required. So it's not a discretionary item, so it will be dealt with. But that said, the approach is being modified to take into account we don't have an elected council. So really the intention is to do the review and have baseline information ready for the new council to come in October. A couple of other things. Roscoe Marshall and I also met with the Arts and Crafts Group to discuss their ongoing need for more suitable premises. And following that discussion, I've had further discussions with both the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage, and also made an informal approach to the Lotteries Commission around options for housing or accommodating community groups. It's not a situation unique to the Arts and Crafts Group, and it does have relevance to the item on the number and condition of our assets that I mentioned earlier. I think Shire staff are working with that group to explore options, including both the use of Shire-owned or controlled land or private premises, but I think it's an ongoing issue that we're going to have to grapple with. And then yesterday I met with the operators of the Triple J Jiu-Jitsu business, along with Stuart Drummond, the Economic Development Officer, who's been endeavouring to support the relocation of this business to a more suitable premises. I think they've looked at a number of potential options, and the operators have indicated that the former SES building in Bentley Street is their preferred option. So the SES building's just around the corner in Bentley Street here, alongside the Memorial Hall. So the Shire has received a proposal from Triple J to take out a lease on the SES building with a commitment to invest up to $20,000 in building maintenance. The proposal was circulated internally to Shire staff and two main issues were raised. The building is currently zoned residential as part of that broader long-term consideration of the vacant land around the existing Shire offices, so this land here going through to the area at the back and also the area where the museum is. So under the current zoning, a commercial or business activity is not a currently permitted use, and there's also some structural issues with asbestos and some problems with the front awning that would need to be addressed, plus some it's currently being used to store some archives and things. However, I've committed to this matter being formally considered by the council at its June meeting, and in the interim, with the consent of the operators, of raising this matter publicly at this meeting, because I and the officers of the council are grappling with that broader question of is this an appropriate use of a building that is currently unoccupied, particularly noting the zoning doesn't allow its use, but of course you juxtapose that with the fact that there currently has been no other identified use, although I think it has previously been talked about for other purposes. So I would invite feedback in advance of the June meeting, and am inviting feedback, but certainly have made a commitment that it will be formally considered. There are a couple of other building-related issues that have been raised over the last couple of months. Both involve approaches to purchase existing Shire-controlled assets, and further information on each is being gathered with a view to seeking community input before a decision is made. So if something hasn't come up before a previous council and had some discussion and consideration, I'd be loath to actually consider it without having some form of public consultation period. So I just wanted to flag those couple. I won't identify the actual buildings because they're not no formal proposals have been raised. On more broad issues, I'd like to congratulate the team behind the BARC, or the Balingup Arts and Cultural Hub launch held in Balingup recently, and by all accounts it was a fabulous event, and the hall does look quite magnificent, so they've really done a great job with the old Balingup Hall. And also congratulations to the town team from Malayalup on the great Roadwise mural, and I think that's fantastic, and I think we're just coming off the back of Road Safety Week, so it's very, very relevant. And equally to the team behind last weekend's expo to mark Volunteers Week, which is also just concluded. It was a great morning at the station markets on Saturday, and I think we had about 18 groups showing off what they do, and I think they got a few new volunteers. I'm also told, and Ross probably knows more detail on this, that the issue with the new lights causing glare at the Donnybrook Football Club has hopefully been dealt with following adjustments made last week. I think someone asked me the question, was that the Shire funding that? And the answer is no. I think the football club have dealt with that, is my understanding. Yes, thank you for confirming that. Susie Delaporte, the Community Engagement Officer for the Shire, has also been trying to finalise quotes for the installation of CCTV at the Donnybrook pump track. Progress has been slower than hoped because of the difficulty of getting quotes and ensuring compatibility with the IT systems, but Susie has been working very diligently on that, and it's something we're very committed to pushing through. On the subject of VC Mitchell Park, I'm due to have a briefing next week on progress towards the next hold point. I'd especially like to thank all the user group representatives who I've been told have worked really constructively together to help shape the design. And I anticipate a special council meeting being convened in early June to consider the next phase of the proposal. And Lisa, to save a question, I have the question of consulting the people around in the vicinity is very much still on the agenda. A couple of things that I'm aware of that have changed in that early part of the design phase with working with the user groups. I think Ross, Sinkaluma has been replaced with Colorbond, hasn't it, so that reduces any glare effect, and some internal modifications have been made, and you've used the expertise of the former operators of Wise Winery, and working with the group, with catering experts about what's needed and what we can rationalise on. So I think that's been working well. I also want to use this opportunity to address an issue that was subject to a motion at the annual electors meeting, and that related to formulation of a committee to provide advice and input into council decision making in the absence of an elected council. The actual motion talked of a statutory committee with council and community representation. The statutory committee isn't provided for in the legislation in the current circumstances when we've got a commissioner, so the full intent couldn't be met. And notwithstanding, I was originally very drawn to the idea, and I've spent a lot of time considering a mechanism that might add value. I think I mentioned last time it would not comprise particular representative groups, but more so broadly if we set something up. Among the options seriously considered were a call for nominations from the community, or alternatively to invite 2 representatives from among the former council members to join 2 youth representatives and 2 others, such as the Audit Risk Committee members, to form such a group. And then the other option, which I've settled on, is to continue to encourage a much more open level of engagement from Shire staff and from me in the role of Commissioner, to elicit as broad a range of views as possible. I simply couldn't come up with any model that allowed the sort of representation without a democratically elected sort of representative group. So where necessary, this can be complemented by either specific user or a reference group. And so, for instance, we've got the VC Mitchell Users Group at the moment. I think the Balingup Progress Association is operating quite effectively. There's a men's shed, the Arts and Craft, the CWA, the emergency services groups, or broader public comments, such as I've flagged with the proposal for the SES building, depending on the issue being considered. I think that just gives us a broader range. So having now been in the role for 5 months, I've made a considerable effort to understand some of the key issues facing the Shire, and I'll continue to do so while remaining very cognisant of the responsibility that comes with being a decision-making body of one. So thank you, and thank you for bearing with that statement. Now, Lauren, I assume we've had no more joy with either the screen behind me or the technology? No. So, okay, so we will put a post on Facebook for those people who are sitting back with their glass of wine enjoying the council or hoping to enjoy the council live streaming. So, yeah, so from that point. And as I say, welcome to those in the public gallery. We are moving now to declarations of interest, and Division 6, Subdivision 1 of the Local Government Act 1995 notes that care should be taken by all councillors, so in this case me, to ensure that a financial/impartiality interest is declared and they refrain from voting on any matter which is considered to come within the ambit of the Act. I'm not aware of anything on tonight's agenda, but whilst I think I've noted in the past that I've declared my various interests, there's a couple of changes that I just wanted to make people aware of. One, I've stepped away from the Board of Leadership WA, where I was actually the interim chair, so that involvement ceased at the end of March. But as of last week, I think the 17th of May, from memory, I commenced as the Chancellor of Murdoch University. So whilst I was a member of the Senate, I have now taken on the role of Chancellor of the uni. So then public question time in terms of item 5.1. Series of responses to previous public questions taken on notice, so I'll take those as read, so that just a reminder that one related to the compliance audit return. The other was the statutory budget review, and I think they were the two, and they've been responded to, but if you've got any follow-ups later, I'd invite you there. In terms of public question time, item 5.2, if we could lead off with the ones that have been submitted. So thank you in particular to Patricia Walker, and Patricia is with us in the gallery tonight, so I really thank you for attending. And the question is, would the Shire Council be prepared to consider the building of a clock tower made of Donnybrook stone to be erected at a site open to public view? This was the wish of Mr. John Walker Senior before his death, and it would be a benefit to the town's history in making known the early pioneers of the district. I also thought that if this was agreed on, maybe a competition could raise interest in the town's early stone quarries in which Mr. Walker was involved. Now, while the formal response is that staff will consider research and consider the matter, noting that it's not been identified through our asset management plan, council plan or any other community consultation in recent years, I think it's a really interesting idea. And Sandra was telling me before, Patricia was telling me before, that I think it was your ex-husband's grandfather was John Walker, and he was very involved in there. I don't know whether you're willing or want to just make a couple of comments for the benefit of anyone listening or in the audience, or if you want to, you do, but don't feel as though you have to. Otherwise, I can just talk more generally.
Well, I'd like to.
Yeah, please come up and if you come and sit up here at this chair, and the reason I do that is that you can then speak into the microphone and the audio recording picks it up for the people that are listening. So just in one of these chairs here, and then I'll get you to press the little red button on the right hand side to make sure the recording, and just bring the mic a bit closer to your face. Oh, it's a white button, is it? Yes. So bring the little lever towards you. Perfect. You're now pretending to be a Shire councillor at the moment.
Thank you. Well, you've already said what I was going to say anyway, but it was brought to our attention through a newspaper clipping from years ago in one of the local papers that Mr. John Walker Senior had not requested, but had wished that there would be a Donnybrook stone clock tower built in the town somewhere to sort of honour the early pioneers. So I thought that I'd come to the meeting and put it to the meeting and see what happens. Mr. Walker was born in Scotland in 1862 and died about 1947, I think. I never ever met him. He came to Donnybrook as a quarryman in 1911 and to manage the quarries in Donnybrook. He was previously involved in quarries in Scotland. He'd also been in the British Army and served in the Sudanese War. He participated in the changing of the guards at Buckingham Palace during the latter part of Queen Victoria's reign, and he was also known as an expert when it came to explosives. And that's about it.
Well, it's really interesting. So thank you. And it's not just to you before, because Susan Delacourt has also had an approach around so there's a couple of things cropping up in the history of both the Old Preston Road Board a couple of things cropping up in both the history of the Old Preston Roads Board and Donnybrook, that really are bringing some of these things to the fore. And I think I'd acknowledge Neville in the row there, who's been doing a lot in the public gallery of doing a lot to try and restore some of the history of the town. So I think it's something well worth considering. How and what that looks like, I don't know, so I won't make any commitments now, but I think the staff were quite enthused about doing a little bit of history, and there's probably people, I think, within the various groups in town that would know a little bit more.
Most of the pioneers have gone, but the younger folk are still around, and I'm sure it would be a lot of interest to the whole town.
Well, thank you for that. Yes, so
Thank you.
Thank you for attending. Yes. Okay. The next question, I'm sorry we can't get them up on the screen, was from Sandra Hoff from Loudon, and Sandra's asked, when will the Shire Strategic Plan be open for public comment? The response that's been provided is ordinarily local government strategic community plans, sometimes called council plans, are required to be reviewed every 4 years with a minor or desktop review every second year. The Shire of Donnybrook Balingup Council Plan was last reviewed in 2022, meaning the next major review is due to be completed in 2026, which would include significant community consultation. Notwithstanding the mandatory review period, the Shire can determine to review its council plan on a shorter cycle than 4 yearly. Now, the current reforms to the Local Government Act by state government are seeking to streamline some of those mandatory integrated planning and reporting framework requirements for the smaller local governments. So that's Band 3 and 4, and we're a Band 3, including consideration for longer timeframes between the review of documents such as Strategic Community Plan, Council Plan, Long-Term Financial Plan, Asset Management Plan, etc. Until the legislation is supported with guiding state policy, we can't advise on any precise timeframes or processes for review, except to say that the review process is likely to be less onerous and less frequent. But if there's any feedback or suggestions on the council plan, please do not hesitate to communicate it to the Shire. Now, as an addendum to that, and I'm going to cover this when we're talking more generally, but I have when we talk about the item on the mining tenements, I have a feeling Sandra may be referring instead, and Kira, I think you alerted me to this afternoon, so thank you, to the actual the local planning strategy, which was signed off at the March by me, or at the March Ordinary Council meeting, for forwarding to the West Australian Planning Commission for their approval to advertise it for public comment. So that's it may be the document, so I just wanted to, sort of clarify that. It has been, that document, the local planning strategy, has been submitted to the Planning Commission. They have, about a month after we submitted it, they I think formally, they accepted it, I think but they for their review, they haven't yet provided us feedback, but we don't think there's going to be any reason. And when it comes back approved for public comment, that gets released for how long? Remind me again. It's a minimum of 28 days, isn't it? Yeah, minimum of 21, but we were thinking a couple of months probably. And the reason that's important in the context of the item on mining tenements and notification of landholders, it doesn't currently include anything in there, so this is in relation to the Preston Valley. But it will be interesting if people have views on whether there should be something explicit in there. So I think that was one of the things we were going to specifically ask for feedback on at that time. So thank you for that. A second question from Sandra Hoff. How many staff are employed by the Donnybrook Baling Up Shire? The response from the Chief Executive Officer is that there are currently 67 full-time equivalents made up of 97 employees, so that's a mix of part-time and full-time. That's the head count of 97. Of the 67 full-time equivalents, there are presently 4.5 full-time equivalent positions vacant, unfilled, or in the process of being filled. So short answer is there's 97 bodies, but they don't all work full-time, so it equates to 67 full-time equivalents. So then the next public question, Lisa, can I invite you to come up, because I think you're next, wherever you would like to sit. Yes, I think we're going to have to put your questions on notice, but unless Kim has anything more. Question one was around the tenancy agreements, in particular the information that was provided and reported on in the Preston Press around the outgoings of the Park Cafe. And I think your question was what are the actual outcomes funded by ratepayers, and you were talking about all of the subsidiary costs.
Sorry,
clarify it for me.
I might have been using the wrong terminology there. I might have slipped back into my work hat. I was suggesting what, first of all, in the Preston Press, not the most recent one, but the one before that, it had talked about transparency around lease agreements, and it says there that the leasee also pays all outgoings such as electricity, water usage. So my part A to my question is, what are all the outgoings included in that tenancy as well? And part B was that do the residents or ratepayers of the Donnybrook Baling Up Shire contribute anything towards paying for those outgoings? That's my question. Yeah. So I'm happy to take it on notice if that's required. Because I have looked back through the budget and noted, income and outgoings and things like that on it, and do know that it is very difficult to track.
Yeah, I'll ask Kim if he's got anything that he can add, but I think it will be one on notice. Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Ms Glover, for your question. Look, I'm actually happy and comfortable to answer the question.
Oh.
Normally, under the arrangement or a lease arrangement, most charges would go straight to the tenant. So in this case, due to actual meters and then sub-meters, what actually happens with sewage rates and sewer rates, water usage and the service charges for those, and electricity, effectively they all come to the Shire. They're the only ones that we pay, and then what we do is we seek reimbursement. So we invoice the operators or the leaseholders. Other outgoings, other normal business outgoings, say for example telephone, internet, those types of outgoings, they go direct to the actual leaseholder, and we have nothing to do with them at all.
I do note that in a previous council meeting I was asking about some internet charges that were connected to that facility, and the answer that I did get from that was that because it was connected to our heritage and there was something there that was needing to upload images and things like that too, that the Shire were funding that connection. And so my question is that still happening? The other part is and this is my question, because part of it, we know that the lease is in staged, or it's got incremental increases to it. Is that also connected to the power and water usage as well? Is that in the lease? Is that also partly funded or subsidised by the residents and ratepayers.
Yeah, look, I think there's two parts to your follow-up questions, and one is with regard to the internet service. My understanding is that we do have some digital historical type stuff going on down there. I'm not able to answer in full that particular question. Your second question, in terms of is there effectively any discount or concession with regard to outgoings that increment over a period of time? No, they're 100% straight up.
That's been identified in the lease.
I'm certain. I will double check it for
Let
you.
me-
Perhaps take it on notice.
No, I'll
Thank you.
read you the exact, because Lauren's been clever enough to find me the provisions. So basically, the lessee agrees to pay the lessor or such person, whatever, all of the following outgoings or charges, if applicable, assessed or incurred in respect of the premises. A, local government rates, taxes, charges and services, including charges for rubbish removal and the emergency services levy. B, water, drainage and sewage rates, charges for disposal of stormwater, meter rent and excess water charges. C, any other consumption charge or cost, statutory impost or other obligation incurred or payable by reason of the lessee's use and occupation of the premises. And if the premises are not separately charged or assessed, the lessee will pay the lessor a proportionate part of any charge or assessment referred to in that foregoing clause, being the proportion that the premises bears, being the proportion that the premises bears to the total area. This has gone blank.
Sorry, I turned mine on.
That's all right. I have to find the proportion part referred to in clause being the proportion that the premises bears to the total area of the land or premises included in the charge or assessment. So I would assume that then that is, but we will double check and come back. So no, that's sorry, and then. Yeah, and power, premises for telephone, electricity, yes, include but not limited to meter rents. So we will formally come back with that response as well. So, okay. Your second question that you had was what is the total rate revenue collected from mining tenements? And unless Kira or Kim are super magicians, I have great faith in their ability, but I don't know that they can pluck this figure from the air, so I think we will take that on notice if we can.
Yes, Commissioner, if we could please take that on notice. It won't take a lot, but it will take some extraction out of the rates database, yes.
I appreciate that, and I do understand that, yeah, these things may take some time, but I know that you're really good at this, Mr Dozzadelli, so I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ms Glover. Any other questions? Can I preempt one about the Collins Street Road? Oh, no, Neville, please come up. Yeah, this, Mr Clifford, yes, okay. And put your little white or red button on.
It's red.
Oh, I see. Yeah, right. It's not that big an issue, but the street that goes behind the main street, like near the river, is named after our family, Clifford's Road or Street. I'm not sure. There's no sign on the road. I'm just wondering. There used to be, but it's gone. Well, no, well, I'm not going to enter into that. So I was just wondering, probably this isn't the forum for it, but I thought, well, seeing I'm here, I might as well bring it up. All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you. We will check that. I did say, I did cheekily say it's not in your new unit, but yes, but yes, street signs I gather are quite a prized possession for some people, unfortunately. Okay, thank you.
Double click.
All right. You said earlier on about Triple J the bloke that's karate out here, he was looking at the Shire building. Why is the Shire helping private enterprise?
It's a fundamental question which is why I said I wanted it to come back formally to the meeting, because I think it's the position that's been put is that they don't make any money. They consider they're performing a community service. I see it as a commercial enterprise, but of course there's also the challenge that the Shire has been criticised for not being supportive of businesses trying to establish or remain established in town, and I think there's those couple of tensions, but I think it is a really challenging one to think that the Shire would make available facilities, particularly when there are other groups that are community groups with a need. So that's why I wouldn't actually look at it unless it comes before a formal council meeting, and why I flagged it for people actually providing some feedback.
Well, I believe that those buildings that the Shire have got is for clubs and pottery clubs or whatever. I don't think they should be for private enterprise, because those people down the main street, they pay rent like anyone else. Anyway, that's just my...
No, I appreciate the view, and that's why I said I would want to get some comments from people in the community as to their feelings on it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Did you want me to answer my Collins Street as best I can on Collins Street, and why is the road being ripped up again? Partly, and I'm not going to put that bit on the record, but let me try and explain a little bit. There was some work done on the corner, which is coming, where Egan Park comes out previously. There was also a bit more done alongside the Apple Fun Park. It was not a satisfactory job, and it was redone a couple of times. I'm told by Damien that most of the part of Collins that is being worked on now has not previously been done, although there's varying, it's certainly not in the last 5 years, but people tell me maybe 6 years, maybe 7 years. It's got a bit of a history of being pulled up, and I'm sure there's people in the room that know this. But there's also the little bit around where Station Street comes onto Station Square that has previously been worked on, but that's being redone to enable a better transition between the new work being done. But in terms of, one of the questions is, can we put forward a schedule of what works are going to be done? It becomes relatively complicated because a lot of our roads are classified, as people who've previously been on council will know, in various tiers of red roads, blue roads, yellow roads, depending on whether they're part of the state road network, a regional road. What are the categories, Kira? Primary, regional, local, and then there's various distributors. So the great bulk of our roads program is actually dictated by Main Roads' own sort of schedule of when they're going to do things, and they are inclined from time to time to shift their priorities and their program around. There's also then, for a lot of the other roads, including some of those local roads that are responsible of the Shire, there's a regional roads group that also comes up with a listing. And the trick is you're not able to apply or get federal or state or other funding unless your road has been identified on that particular list that's come up with at the regional, that's been developed at the regional level. But then, when we do the asset condition reports, as part of the budget sort of cycle, and Mr. Dolcedelli might talk a little bit more about that, there are, through that process, that identifies some of those smaller roads that will need working on as well, and of course that then might come from the Shire budget and be dealt with that way. Is that a sort of summation of the complexity of roads? Yes. But Collins Street, yes, we know it's had various bits of roadworks on. I can't explain in exact detail of which bits have been done when, but it was looking a bit better this afternoon when I walked past there. So thank you. Yeah. No further questions? Yeah, come in, yeah, please.
Just in relation to the Southampton Road, there's been work done on
Yeah.
that, but does the junction between the highway or or I suppose it's just a junction of what the Shire's done and what the main roads are supposed to do. That was earmarked a while ago, but then it hasn't happened, so it's a main road, it's probably job on the Shire job, I'm not sure where it
Yeah, I think
falls.
if it,
Because it's actually coming in at the wrong angle to meet the road, so doesn't it? It's not a right angled.
this is when you come back
Junction.
into Baling up from,
No, up Southampton Road
Yeah,
onto the highway.
yeah, I came there this morning, I went out to.
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah. So you come in on an
Yeah,
angle
yeah.
to it.
It's
where-
not an easy angle.
No, that's right. Yeah, and I think there was a proposal to do some work there by the main roads, but that hasn't happened. So I'm
Okay.
not sure whether
Yeah,
the Shire can look into that or not. Or
I'm sure we can, because I went out before dawn this morning to try and get sunrise at the Golden Valley Tree Park, but I missed the sunrise, and but I did remember that intersection coming back into town. Thank you. All right, we shall move on if there's no further questions, so thank you for that. We have no petitions at 6.1, we have no presentations at 6.2, we have no deputations at 6.3. So I then move to confirmation of the minutes, and that's the ordinary council meeting of council on the 22nd of March 2023, and they've been attached. The recommendation is that the minutes from the ordinary meeting of council, the Commissioner held on 22nd of March, be confirmed as a true and accurate record, and I'm prepared to carry that. Then 7.2 was the special meeting of council, the Commissioner on the 2nd of May 2023. The minutes of the special meeting of council, Commissioner, are attached there, but obviously, as I've indicated before, that was the special meeting called to consider the waste management contract, and we are bound by the arrangement with the other shires to not disclose the successful respondent until all the councils have dealt with that and an announcement has been made. But I'm happy to, the recommendation is that the minutes from the special meeting of council, Commissioner held on 2nd of May 2023, be confirmed as a true and accurate record, and I will carry that. Then item 7.3, the Bushfire Advisory Committee Annual General Meeting of the 4th of May 2023, and the executive recommendation is that the minutes from the Bushfire Advisory Committee Annual General Meeting of 4th of May be received, and I'm happy to receive those. And at that same time, could I just acknowledge and thank those involved in our bushfire service, both the career and volunteers. So I don't think we can underestimate the job they do. We have reports of committees at item 8, and there are none of those in particular. Reports of officers and the Director of Operations, and 9.1.1 mining tenements within the Shire of Donnybrook Baling Up. And I appreciate someone did say this was a fairly, I can't remember the description, but it was an unflattering description of the amount of papers. But I would actually like to thank the Shire staff, because I think they worked really hard on this one. And I also acknowledge the work that Julian Hilbers and Jeff Bremer have done. So effectively the issue's been raised. I've flagged it that it will be something that people may wish to comment on with the local planning strategy. I have said to Jeff and Julianne, who I've met with a couple of times now, and found them to be quite reasonable in their reasoned and reasonable in their approach, that I'm not prepared to support council resources being sort of consumed to solve a problem that is actually a problem that is effectively under the legislation of the Department of Mine, or under the Mining Act. But having said that, I am very sympathetic to the obligations and the capacity to inform landowners around what's going on in their property. And I think, Kira, you can correct me where I get things wrong, but we did have a look, and I did ask staff to have a look at what other shires were doing, and this because this has arisen from the desire to protect the Preston Valley and the question of the compatibility of operations within that Preston River Valley. and the agribusiness and tourism focus of the valley, and whether there can be coexistence and certain, whether there should be a shire position taken. So the staff looked around at the other shires. Shire of Manjimup have probably done the most recent work, and I think you were good enough to include a lot of the background from there. They probably concluded the same thing. The issue that we have, if I sort of try and summarise it, is that when there's two elements. One is the land below the 30-metre mark is not the property of the landowner as it's such. So a lot of the, whether it's a deliberate strategy to work round the legislation or the provisions, but a lot of these applications for tenements are coming in for exploration below that 30-metre mark, so that it removes that the positive obligation to consult with the landowner, and that's causing a lot of tension. I think that is something that has to be dealt with by the Department of Mines, but equally the Shire, whilst we get notified of tenement, of applications for exploration or other permits, we don't necessarily get notified straight away. So for us to actually then take on an obligation of writing to individual landowners would both be resource intensive and expensive, and probably not necessarily very practical. So I think what Manjimup have done, and I think we're looking at picking up the same thing, is that we will try and include a lot more information on the website around the intersection of the Mining Act, the Planning and Development Act, and some of our own obligations or responsibilities, and have a website that people can opt into, that when we do get information, they automatically get a notification that either something's come in, or there's new information, or there's a fact sheet, or whatever. And I think that's being developed at the moment. Apparently the link, there was a bit of a problem, but that is in the process of being fixed. It's up and running today, is it? Yeah. So is that sort of a fair enough summation of where we're at?
Yes.
Yeah.
As I understand it, Shire of Manjimup aren't doing direct email notification, but they are putting a notification on their website. So what we have decided to do is both, essentially. So we'll be able to put a notification on this particular section of the website, and in the meantime we're collating email addresses for people that want to be sent an email notification when we receive one.
Great. And so that's sort of part A. The second part was, I think Jeff and Julian had made, they'd met with staff from the Minister for Mines office, and shortly after they then met with myself and Ben Rose last week, I think it was Ben, they got notified by the Department for Mines that they'd been asked by the Minister's office for someone from the department to meet with them. At the same time, I'd made contact with the staff from Department of Mines, Industry and Resources, and they clearly, from the nature of the email exchanges, recognise it's an issue, because they've invited our planning staff to make contact with them to discuss, how some of those things might work. And equally, my understanding is that they've now placed an officer in the Southwest office who will deal with a lot of these things. So the engagement with the department has been quite positive, but I think we want to actually provide support for the, in terms of a notification, but not create sort of an impost on the staff, which is just not something we should be bearing, and where the problem lies somewhere else. So I suppose I've been fairly firm on that one as well. So the recommendation here, so the upshot of all the information that's in the pack, is that the Council, the Commissioner, acknowledge the actions undertaken by staff as they relate to the motions raised at the annual general meeting of electors held on 7th of February 2023, and further explored by Council, the Commissioner held at the ordinary meeting of 22 March 2023. So it's sort of just letting people know where things are at with that one. So I'm happy to carry that motion as well. Okay. Now the next one is item 9.1.2, and there's a notice of motions from the Warren Blackwood Alliance of Councils, the Climate Change Action Plan Implementation Reference Group, and the CEO and I attended a meeting a week or so ago of the Warren Blackwood Alliance of Councils where this was mentioned. They asked that we consider some motions that had been prepared by the executive officer of that alliance. Those three motions, the recommendation that the council or the commissioner receive the three motions raised at the Warren Blackwood Alliance of Councils Climate Change Action Plan Implementation Reference Group meeting held on 17th of February 2023 as it relates to the Shire's level of participation in the implementation of the Warren Blackwood Alliance of Councils Climate Change Action Plan. And motion one for that one was that the Chief Executive Officer investigate the Shire joining the Waterwise Councils program and prepare a report to Council or the Commissioner for consideration. Motion two, the Chief Executive Officer investigate the Shire joining the City's Power Partnership and prepare a report to Council, the Commissioner for consideration. And motion three, that the Chief Executive Officer investigate the Shire signing the Welga Climate Change Declaration and prepare a report to Council, the Commissioner for consideration. The recommendation from the staff here is that we acknowledge that it has considered motions 1, 2 and 3 and instruct the Chief Executive Officer to investigate the Shire of Donnybrook Balingup joining the Waterwise Councils program until an elected, and defer a decision to join it until an elected council is established. 2.2, advise the Executive Officer of the Warren Blackwood Alliance of Councils Climate Change Action Plan Implementation Reference Group that the Shire is an existing participant in the City's Power Partnership, so therefore no actions required there. 2.3, investigate the Shire signing the Welga Climate Change Declaration and defer the decision to sign that Welga Climate Change Declaration until an elected council is established. So, and the reason for that is that Shire officers need to investigate the responsibilities and implications associated with motions 1 and 3 to ensure the council has a thorough understanding of the benefits and potential resourcing implications associated with these two items. And then the Shire is already a member of the City's Power Partnership, therefore no further action is required for motion 2. And Lauren, for your information there, we've picked up a typo in that recommendation, so it should actually be motion 2 referenced as that last part of that motion rather than motion 3, so if that can be amended please. And yes.
Commissioner, the numbering is also just needed to be a bit updated on this version, not on this version.
Oh, okay, and the numbering does need some updating. So subject to the numbering and the City's Power, I have to remember the exact name of it again now, the City's Power Partnership already being done, the other two for the consideration of an incoming council, so I'm prepared to carry that as amended, so thank you. Now, 9.1.3, this is a request to close a portion of an unconstructed road reserve, Darronks Road at Balingup, and it's about 5 kilometres southeast, I think, of Balingup. It's a road that's never been constructed. It's never, in fact, approximately 5 kilometres southeast of the Balingup town site. It's 1.9 hectares. It's currently unconstructed and not identified in the Shire's Works and Services program for future construction. The request has been made by the adjacent landowner for the purpose of private acquisition and amalgamation with their property. The requisite consultation with all affected parties was undertaken, and there's been no objections to that. I've double checked with the Shire staff that it doesn't exist on any plans and it's not in an area that will impact anyone. So the recommendation is that the Council, the Commissioner, pursuant to Section 58 of the Land Administration Act 1997, resolved to authorise the Chief Executive Officer to request the Minister for Lands to close the road, subject to all associated costs with the request being borne by the relevant applicant/landowner, and just for the purpose of clarification, to close the road identified in attachment 2, if we can include that there so that it makes it very clear which road we are closing. And I'm happy to move and carry that motion. Think that you didn't need to speak to that, Kira? Okay, thank you. Okay, the next item is the 9.1.4, the annual review of the Shire of Donnybrook Baling Up Firebreak Order 2023-24 financial year. I'm being asked that the Council Commissioner endorse the 2023-24 Shire of Donnybrook Firebreak Order and instruct the Chief Executive Officer to produce and distribute the 2023-2024 Shire of Donnybrook Baling Up Firebreak Order in accordance with Section 33 of the Bushfires Act 1956. My understanding there is that it's part of the annual review, and the only changes that have been, or the changes that have been made during the Bushfire Advisory Committee meeting, it's been updated to, or will be updated to reflect changes to the Australian Fire Danger Rating System, so the AFDRS, correcting a couple of grammatical errors, inclusion of Mr Brad Kettle as the Fire Control Officer for Mumbalup Bushfire Brigade subject to authorisation, and Bushfires Act 1954 Summary Point 10, inclusion of defined extinguisher size of 9 litres, because it was previously undefined, so I'm prepared to move and carry that one as well, so thank you for that. Then the last fire-related one is 9.1.5, endorsement of nominated fire control officers. I don't intend to read out the entire motion because it's quite big, but it's actually appointing the fire control officers. You have it in front of you if you wish to look, but I would actually formally record for the record that that provided that they have to do their DFES training. But for Argyle Irish Town, we're thanking Mr Scott Rowe, Baling Up Mr Paul Davis, Beeler Up Mr Stuart Simmons, Donnybrook Town Mr David Took, Ferndale Stirling Park Mr Max Walker, Kirrup Mr Chris Ringe, Loudon Mr Michael Anderson, Mulyalup Mr William Andrew, in brackets Andrew Scott, Mumbalup Noggerup Mr Brad Kettle, Munro Mr Taz Tamo, Thompson Brook / Brookhampton Mr Graham Phone and Mr Tim McNabb, and Upper Capel Mr Bevan Dix. So I'm prepared to move and carry that as well. So, and thank you to those people for taking on those significant roles. Oh no, I have got another bushfire one. I forgot I had one more. There's more, she says. 9.1.6, election of Bushfire Advisory Committee office bearers. And then I'm being asked to endorse the recommended office bearers for the Bushfire Advisory Committee as follows. So Chairperson Bevan Dix, Chief Bushfire Control Officer Max Walker, Deputy Chief Bushfire Control Officer David Took, Deputy Chief Bushfire Control Officer Ian Ralph, Communications Officer and Fire Weather Officer, the two roles, Murray Webb. So thank you to those. I endorse those recommended office bearers and carry that motion. So thank you. Now, the one I referred to in my earlier comments, 9.2.5 is one of the two what I consider the really substantive items on the agenda, and this is a report on the results of the 5-yearly asset revaluations. The recommendation is that I'm being asked to receive the reports, and I've skipped a couple, have I? What have I skipped? Oh, accounts for payment. Yes, Kim, yes. So sorry about that. I wasn't looking at the right section of the agenda. So 9.2, Director Corporate and Community. 9.2.1, accounts for payment March 2023. So the schedule of accounts paid under delegation number 1.2.21 is presented for public information, and that's at attachment 9.2.1, bracket 1 of the agenda attachments. And then 9.2.2, accounts for payment April 2023. The schedule of accounts paid under delegation number 1.2.21 is presented for public information, and that's attachment 9.2.2, small bracket, bracket 1. So I present those for information. Then the monthly financial report for March 2023 is attached, and that's attachment 9.2.3, bracket 1. And again, there's a recommendation that the monthly financial report for the period ended March 2023 be received. and I move that and carry that. Now, Kim, I haven't invited you to speak on that because I think it's attached and I'd rather you speak on the substantive items. So, okay, thank you. Okay, the monthly report for April 2023, 9.2.4. The monthly financial report for April 2023 is also attached. It's been recommended that that be received. I move that the monthly financial report for the period ended April 2023 be received, and I carry that motion, so thank you. Now we can move to the item 9.2.5. My apologies there. So as I say, this is quite a significant one where the recommendation looks relatively simple in terms of receiving the reports and then instructing the Chief Executive Officer to include the updated asset valuations and the estimated economic life sourced from the revaluations in the review of asset management plans, scheduled to be presented back to me in June or July. But I think it's worth asking you, Kim, because I've certainly asked you a number of questions, and I will ask you to repeat some of that back so that you give a bit of a layperson's interpretation of what this means, because I did, particularly given the condition report of some of the buildings is, listed as an 8, 9 or 10, which basically says they're beyond redemption, I think in my lay terms, or getting close to beyond redemption. And equally that I think some of the abbreviations, and I struggled with things like what the professional fees column on things was to cover. So I just thought if you could step us through. I don't mean to stay here until 8 o'clock, but in a fairly succinct way, what you can, give us the layperson's potted summary. Thank you. Certainly can. I won't make you say. And I really do thank you for attending because I think it's a really good point you've raised. Thank you. Now, if anyone wants to shut the door if they're cold, feel free to. Yes, because I don't think we'll let you out if you want to get out, but I don't think anyone else is going to be coming in. Yeah, thank you. I can feel the cold air up here, so I figured you might be able to as well. So, Kim, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, it's certainly a comprehensive report when you look at the number of pages in the attachments. It's 206 pages, so I don't intend to go through every single page and every single item, but I'd like to give you a broad understanding of the reports, the processes, what it means in real terms, talk about some of the perhaps challenges we have and what we are doing to try and address those challenges as well. So just referring to the attachment 9.2.5 which is the state of the assets report attachment. It's 46 pages, but just to give a general overview, and I guess to lead in, this whole process is about being about revaluing assets that the Shire holds. Okay, so effectively we bring on assets. Initially they were at cost. We've been through a revaluation cycle already, and every 5 years we need to revalue assets to make sure that our books reflect a fair value of what all our buildings are currently worth, etc. What it also does is identifies condition rating on buildings, if we're talking about buildings. So I guess the exercise is non-paper exercise, realistically for accounting purposes. But let me just run through some of the categories and give you a bit of a feel for our asset base, where it is, what's happening with it, and how those revaluations have impacted on it. So just with buildings, if you're not aware, the council or the Shire, the community, has 132 buildings which is very significant for a local government of this size. The asset consumption ratio, which is essentially a ratio which is actually no longer used by the Department of Local Government. However, what it does is it is formed to, in a very raw manner, effectively tell you how much of the asset do you have left. And you could convert that to life to a large degree. So in that buildings category, the consumption ratio is 57%. So we've consumed 43% of the brand new shiny asset value. Okay, so it's a percentage of value today as opposed to what it would cost to actually build it new right now. Okay. We have had a declining trend in that ratio over the last 6 years. There is a condition rating set for each of the assets, and they're rated from 1 to 10. When you start to get around rating 8, effectively you're in the area where you're probably looking at some capital renewal being required in the very, very short term. We actually have $3.4 million worth of buildings that fall into that category. And I'll put some more perspective on that, because I don't just want you to go away thinking, oh my God, 3.4 million, where's that going to come from? Also with the buildings, I think it's clear, and I've publicly stated this before and at the annual general meeting of electors, we are embarking on a service level hierarchy for all of our buildings. So effectively what we intend to do is prioritise each of the buildings that we have, okay? And that will drive, I guess, spending on those asset classes. So now, it's not going to be me and a couple of other people in the office doing this. We'll do an original assessment. We will then, once an elected council is formed, we will workshop it with the elected members as well, and then we will consult with the community about that, because you know, a building might be important to a core group of people, maybe not the majority of people. Does that necessarily mean that the building shouldn't exist? So this is a very, you know, a very delicate sort of subject, and I don't see that, you know, any part of the administration should dictate to the community what assets they want, or what should be retained. The other thing is it'll take us down a journey of actually recognising whether or not, and the community, if, a couple of questions, I guess, do they need to be replaced? Are they fit for purpose? Do they need to be like for like? Or are there alternatives to a current building structure that would actually suit today's operations or community needs? What was built 50, 70 years ago isn't necessarily what the community may need today, and may not be the most effective or efficient way of actually providing that space to the community for use. So just to give you a little, I'm not going to run through all of these because there's 136 of them, and obviously I'm not going to run through them all at all. There was one that was rated a 10, which is basically get rid of it, and that's a toilet block in the Bunnings town site. Its full value, replacement cost is $118,000, current value is $7,800. So that's, you know, that's at a critical level. We've got Brookhampton Town Hall, actual valuation, replacement cost is $930,000. Fair value's at $208,000. So there's a gap of $722,000 there. So, you know, I don't know the answer. The community's going to know the answer. But at the end of the day, you know, if you were to have a facility located in the Brookhampton town site, does it need to be a structure like the structure is there? Because if it does, then it's big dollars, but potentially for less dollars, you could have a more appropriate building, but still have the provision of a facility to the community out there. So they're the sorts of things that going through the surface level hierarchy, etc., will address. Bridges, our asset consumption's ratio is 46%. It's actually the highest it's been within the last 6 years. And the important thing to recognise with bridges, all but one of our bridges is realistically under the control of Main Roads Western Australia. And what actually happens, although they're on our books, Main Roads WA determine and dictate when renewal of those bridges occurs. And effectively what happens is Main Roads fund 1/3 of the full cost, and federal government funds the other 2/3. We actually get the 2/3 given to us as a council. Main Roads do the job, they send us an invoice and we hand the money over. But all of this goes on our books. So, whilst there's, we're talking about some significant numbers with bridges, they're not cheap items. It's actually not an avalanche about to hit ratepayers in the neck. It's actually something that is funded from outsourced or outside funding. With bridges, we've got 8 with a rating of 8 above. They're getting very close to needing some solid renewal on them. Other infrastructure and play equipment, the asset consumption ratio is at 58%. So effectively what that means is that with all that equipment and other infrastructure, we've still got 58% left. Same thing, you know, we need to not just replace what we have because we've got it. Every time we look at an asset and it's getting to a point where it's no longer fit for purpose or it's getting to a point of not being serviceable, we should always question whether or not we need to replace it, or is there something better we can do. So that's a very that's an ongoing process which should occur at any point in time. Roads and drainage, our asset consumption ratio is 72%. It is actually holding very steady for the last 6 years. So effectively, you know, we look at our roads, and I know everybody has their own experiences, but it means that 72% of our life in our roads is still there. You know, we might have some that are worse than others, some that are better than others, but all in all, we're actually at a high rate for a district. That's probably all I've got to say on the asset management staff, other than if you ever get the opportunity to go to New South Wales or Victoria, have a drive around, and you'll come back to WA and you'll go, oh my goodness, aren't we so good? And that's been my experience. That doesn't mean that we sink to their levels. Obviously, it's a priority for the community that we have safe roads, safe ways to get around our district.
Thanks, Kim. And just for the avoidance of any doubt, I don't think you're suggesting that the Brookhampton Hall is going. It wouldn't be worth...
No.
It wouldn't be worth my life, I don't think.
Well, I don't think I'd be so brave as to do that. I guess the real message is that with all of this, the reality from my perspective is that the community needs to be heavily involved. And the reason being is that you're the people that use these facilities. you're also the people that are going to pay for them. I'm an individual that works for the Shire. I shouldn't dictate, nor should the administration dictate. In everything like this, though, there's a want, there's a need, and there's a price to either. And the reality is that, the Shire could probably achieve anything you wished as long as you're prepared to pay for it. And then it becomes a balance of working with the community to say, well, okay, we'd like this, but we can't afford it. So, okay, what's the compromise? Where's the level where the community's happy? I wish we had a little tree out the back that grew notes, but it doesn't happen
No.
that way.
No, but thanks, Kim. And I think really the key, one of the objectives I had in getting Kim to go through a little bit of that was, I think we need to look at it as both an opportunity but a very realistic thing we've got to do, because I think we're coming to a stage where we can look at some of there's on any list, and the building service hierarchy will identify some things that absolutely have to be, they're sacrosanct, they have to be retained. But then there'll also be a descending, list of things. And I suppose when I look at 132 buildings, you start to say, well, given that a lot of those buildings aren't fit for purpose anymore, is there a better use of the land or the building or whatever, and what might we be able to do? So I think it's what opportunities that present, as well as some serious conversations about what are those, in a sense, it's not a formal heritage list, but what are those things that absolutely are the top of the tree for the community, and that will be a conversation over the coming years, I think. And I just want to make sure it's on people's radar, because everyone is very quick to say council should, or council must, but there are some realities with some of the buildings we've got, the condition they're in. We're no orphans again in that one. So thank you, Kim. So the recommendation is that I receive those reports: the valuation report of land and building assets for insurance and financial reporting, the valuation report of other infrastructure assets, the infrastructure asset valuation for the roads, car parks, drainage and paths, and the state of the assets results of the 5-year re-evaluations, and that the Council Commissioner instruct the Chief Executive Officer to include the updated asset valuation and the estimated economic life source from the re-evaluations in the 2023-24 review of asset management plan scheduled to be presented to Council Commissioner in June or July 2023. So I'm prepared to move and carry that. So thank you, Kim. And I would encourage people to look through some of those papers. Then item 9.2, thanks Mario. 9.2.6, the 2023-2024 draft budget planning. Again, it looks quite simple that I've been asked to endorse the 2023-24 draft budget outline as contained within the attachment, and request the Chief Executive Officer to prepare the draft budget based on the endorsed assumptions. I think the key message here is things can still change and are likely to change, but you've actually tried to identify some of those parameters. But again, a very quick whiz through what that process has entailed, so people understand it.
Thank you, Commissioner McGowan. Look, and I'll reiterate our Commissioner's comments there. These guidelines certainly are something that we will use for the initial preparation of the draft budget. It will not dictate what the actual budget looks like. As Council, be it the Commissioner at this stage, has the right to alter anything that's presented to them. So just a couple of things, some good news. Local government costs are probably best measured by the WALGA, the WA Local Government Association Local Government Cost Index, in short, LGCI. Utilisation of CPI as a number for our cost index, we're a bit different. We don't necessarily, supermarket trolley is not a big part of our basket of spending. So there are different impacts. And the good news is that LGCI is always lower than CPI. Other good news is that throughout this current financial year, that is expected to grow to 4.5%, which is actually a reduction from last year of 6.4%. Going forward, in the actual year of 23-24, growth throughout that year is expected to decline to 2.9%. So we're slowly seeing some cost pressures starting to come down, and I think if you look at what the Reserve Bank's doing, at some point in time they will start to, well, either stop raising the interest rates or start easing them back. Usually what you find with their increases is that there's a time delay in terms of cause and effect, and it's always a interesting thing to watch from my perspective as to when they think they can pull the foot off the pedal in terms of increasing interest rates, because it can take 6-12 months for the full impacts to actually hit the economy. So I'm glad they're doing it, not me. We expect to adopt the budget in August. We're going to budget on the basis of a balanced budget, so we're not looking for a surplus. We certainly don't want to be in a cash deficit position at the end of that financial year either. So important things that probably are of interest to you people here, and others that may listen to the recording. The rate increase that will be targeted in terms of the draft budget is 6.5%, which is noted in the long-term financial plan for the new financial year. It might need to be adjusted. The important thing to know, and I really want to make a point of this, and I'd like to think that we've been very clear in terms of what's happened in the current financial year and the budget situation, specifically to rates. So what happened in the current financial year was we actually had an 8% rate increase. But what we did is we had a COVID-19 reserve, which was established to utilise against impacts on the economy with regard to COVID. It turns out that everything that we did do during the peak times, we actually were able to fund without touching that reserve. And when working on the budget and looking at the impact of CPI, which more impacts people in the community as opposed to council, we said, hey, this would be a really good opportunity, given that that money in the reserve is that of the communities anyway. Why don't we do a one-off concession for the current financial year of 1.57%, which equated to the $90,000 which was in the budget. So to give you an idea, if your rates were minimum rated, your actual rates that we raised on your account were $1,421, less a concession of $20, so you paid $1,401. The reason I'm explaining this is I'm saying that we're going to have a rate increase of 6.5%. Now you will have that, but you will have that without the concession being afforded in the coming year. So if you reverse engineer the calculations, compared to what you actually had to pay last financial year to the coming year, it's more like 8%. Okay? Because the concession will no longer be in place.
That hasn't been set yet. That's what you're anticipating at this point in
Correct.
time. Yeah.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
And can I ask a question that I think I asked you before? The that concession no longer is available to provide, there's also been that concern that any rate increase is a direct result of the loan and the cost of VC Mitchell. My understanding is that's not the case. Can you explain that a little bit to me?
Yeah, more than happy to explain that. Look, there has been increases in terms of interest rates, as we all know. But built into the actual current budget, I've got a total of 5.12% for the interest repayments on the VC Mitchell Park loan. Originally, that was based on a $3 million loan. During the year, we did a budget amendment because we sold a couple of blocks to the Water Corporation, and the funds that we got from the sale of those, we utilised to reduce the amount of the loan, albeit by $100,000. So, look, I'm actually confident that there will be no or very minor impact in terms of new year rates and the actual cost of the loan, funding the loan or repayment of the loan.
But that will be when the budget's presented in.
That's right, that's right. And because the loan is over a 20-year period, WA Treasury Corporation certainly aren't. Look, we get a fixed rate loan. So we're not in a situation where we're going to borrow money from a bank, and because interest rates are high in the scheme of things, if we take recent years, that we're going to be paying a high rate. We will lock in a rate and we will have that rate for 20 years. So look, there's the least amount of risk in terms of loan funding is certainly through the WA Treasury Corporation.
And what I'm sort of getting the sense as we've discussed this, and I've looked at other councils, is that any rate figure increase that we settle on will certainly be very much either in the middle or certainly not at the high end of some of the rate increases we're seeing around local governments. Is your anticipation at the moment of the stuff coming through as well?
Yeah, that's certainly what I anticipate. We certainly won't be the lowest, but we certainly won't be anywhere near the highest. I think the community, for a number of years now has absorbed significant rate increases, and I think if we follow down that path, that we will come to a point where the rate increases start to moderate, and certainly that's what our long-term financial plan sees. But the further out that you push these rate increases, the harder it is to get to your target, because you have a compounding effect. I've worked in organisations where for 3-4 years in a row they had a 0 rate increase, and the CEO looked brilliant. But 5 years down the track, you've got no money and you can't do anything. And believe me, when you go to your community and say, we have to have a 25% rate increase, that hurts. Like, that really hurts, because people need time to adjust, and they need time to be able to adjust their budgets and such like. Lumping a 25% increase on someone, you ain't doing them any favour.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, thanks, Kim. We'll move on, but I appreciate you providing that overview, because I think it's better if things, people are aware of things as they're likely to be. So the recommendation is that Council or the Commissioner endorse the 2023-24 draft budget outline as contained within the attachment, and request the Chief Executive Officer to prepare the draft budget based on the endorsed assumptions. So I'm prepared to move and carry that as well. So thank you. Now, the next is an information item that I actually asked to be prepared as well. I've mentioned in my introductory comments. So it's item 9.3 and specifically 9.3.1, the reform preparation. I did ask staff to prepare a table and some advice on the impacts and some of the opportunities that we could lead in terms of introduction of some of these reform measures. That report is, as shown at 9.3.1. I've outlined the major items. The recommendation is that Council or the Commission receives the report detailing the upcoming local government reforms. The Shire's administration preparation comments and advice is shown in attachment 9.3.1 bracket 1. So I'm prepared to move and carry that one as well. The next, unfortunately, Mr. Rose is not well, and his children are not well. So I will just alert people to this. It's 9.3.2. Stuart Drummond, who's our Principal Officer Economic Development, has been doing some interesting work, both in terms of business incubator units and a business hub. And I think that's addressing some of those comments I made earlier around the Shire not necessarily having been seen as business friendly, and also that attracting and retaining a diverse mix of businesses. So the proposal is that we prepare a business case for the development and operation of business incubator units and a business hub in the Shire of Donnybrook-Balingup, with the business case to be presented to the Council or the Commissioner for consideration at the August 2023 ordinary meeting. So basically just alerting to the fact that there is some work going on there, and we will also be seeking some funding for support for that as well. So that one I'm prepared to move and carry that one. 9.3.3, I also referred to this in my introductory comments, the Chief Executive Officer Annual Performance Appraisal, the selection of the consultant, effectively the Local Government Act requires that the annual review be done. We've gone out for tender. We only had one tender. I've spoken to the proposed person from Price Consulting, and effectively this is authorising the appointment of Price Consulting as the independent facilitator. The process we'll be using it's in the CEO's contract, is that we have to have an agreement on process. We will certainly have my input, but also invite input from the Director of Operations and the Director of Corporate and whatever Kim's proper business, is it? Yes, title, as well as the two members of the Audit and Risk Committee. So there's an actual working group that is formed by myself and those people, but ultimately it is my decision, and with the idea that we actually carry out the performance appraisal in accordance with the Act, and that provides a benchmark for the incoming council as well. So I'm prepared to move and second that. Move and carry that, sorry, I don't even have to move and second it. 9.3.4, the Local Government Indemnity Scheme, the board appointment, and this is again just seeking my support for the fact that Mr. Rose has been recommended for appointment to the board of the Local Government's Indemnity Scheme, LGIS, as a board director from 1st of July, and that's subject to his time commitments being managed outside of core hours and or via approved leave arrangements, and we have had that discussion around making sure it doesn't impact in that sense, and I think it's actually both a good opportunity for the Shire and for Mr. Rose at a personal level, so I'm happy to move and carry that motion as well. Now, there are no elected member motions to which previous notice has been given under item 10. So item 11, and I also referred to this earlier, new business of an urgent nature introduced by decision of the meeting, and I have to formally agree to receive this late item, which I do. And then it's item 11.1, the H.J. Jack Denning funds. So basically, there's been ongoing discussions with the executor of both the Denning funds and now the Frank Crowley funds. The current balance of the Jack Denning bequeathed funds being in the vicinity of 215,000, and the Frank Crowley funds being almost 54,000. So the idea is that they are transferred via a deed of trust to a deed established for the defined purpose of relieving the needs arising from old age in respect of residents to Tuia Lodge. The deed has been drawn up or is in the process of being finalised. I think it has been executed by, or will be executed by Jackson McDonald Lawyers, have prepared it on our behalf. The legal fees of around 7,500 will be deducted from the overall amount, but then in a sense it will be up to the trustees to determine how that money is spent, and the Shire won't have that involvement. And just also acknowledging that because of the way interest rates are moving, that final figure might have some minor adjustments as at the date of the funds transferred. But again, I'm prepared to move and carry that, and I particularly would like to thank Neil Fole, John Ringe and Louis Tuia for working with us on that, and that follows on from some from some considerations the previous council determined at its November 22 meeting. So that's a nice one to have finalised. Now I do have two things that for which I need to close the meeting, and one is the Chief Executive Officer KPIs. I'm quite happy to talk in general terms on what that involves, and effectively, whilst it's a confidential item, there are a couple of KPIs that it's impractical, that are set in the current context, that are impractical to actually do at the moment. One of those relates to developing a campaign to promote the Donnybrook Adventure Zone with pump track, skate park and Apple Fun Park, and the other is reviewing best practice approaches for conducting council meetings. It's been suggested that those two be deferred, one until there's a new council, but the other one is because we've just got some new staff in that community engagement space, defer those into the next year. So while I'll formally deal with them in a closed session, I just want to alert you to what they were. And as I also mentioned previously, the senior employment appointment of the Director of Operations, I intend to deal with that now. So on that note, I will formally close the meeting to the public. I don't think we then read these items out at the end, do we, Lauren? So we won't reopen the meeting. So then I'll do a formal closure at the end of that, but I would advise that the next meeting will be held on the 28th of June, commencing at 5 p.m. in the council chamber. I think I'll be about 2 minutes at most with this, so feel free if you need to chat to me to stay around, or else take your leave and go and enjoy your dinner. But thank you for attending. Have you got 2 seconds afterwards, Neville? Yeah, so, yeah, if you have, yeah. Okay, so I'll formally close the meeting to the public. Yes, no, thank you. Thank you, and thank you for attending. Okay, we're live again. I reconvene the meeting to deal with 12.1.1, the KPIs. The motion as presented, I approve and, I move and carry, so that one's done. And then 12.1.2, the designated senior employee appointment, Director of Operations. In accordance with 5.37 of the Local Government Act, I accept the recommendation with the employment of Ross Marshall, and acknowledges that a contract will be negotiated with a probation period. So I move and carry that one. And then I declare the meeting closed at 6:48.